Today we begin the season of Lent, and it's a great and joyful time in one way because this is a grace-filled season. It's a beautiful season of Lent, a time of turning back to the Lord and drawing near to Him. And so, as our opening prayer said, we're beginning this 40-day spiritual campaign, so to speak, and it recalls the story of Exodus when the Israelites journeyed through the desert for 40 years. And there's some parallels to that experience. For the Israelites, it was a time of difficulty and a time of trial, but it was also a time of profound encounter with the Lord. The Israelites' time in the desert was almost the most grace-filled time of being close to the Lord when they encountered Him on Sinai and in the midst of the desert. And so the goal is that our experience of Lent would really parallel that in both ways, both that there would be some difficulty, some trial, a sort of penance, but also a great time of grace, drawing near to God. The season of Lent is also a time for accompanying Jesus as He spends His 40 days in the desert. And so I think we should keep this in mind as we go through the days of Lent, that we're not just on this by ourselves. One, we're united with each other, but also that we're united with Jesus. Each day of our Lenten observance, we're with Jesus in the desert. And that can help us to take to heart this season and also to persevere in the various practices of Lent. There's really three primary pillars of Lent. Maybe you've already heard these, and each of them helps us to enter into this season. And it's best if we find some way to observe each of these three pillars. So the first pillar is centered on union with God, and that pillar is prayer. And so we should look for a way to enter into prayer more intentionally during this season. I might suggest, if you're not sure what to do, to try and come to adoration once a week. We have it on Tuesday and Thursday, or even to visit our adoration chapel, but in some way to be intentional about prayer during this season of Lent. The second pillar has to do with eliminating obstacles to God. So various things that aren't bad in themselves can nonetheless begin to get in the way of the Lord. And so this is the purpose of fasting, right? Whether it's fasting from food or other things that can begin to get in the way of the Lord. Today we're fasting, a reminder that we're fasting today, and so we can become hangry. I know I myself can become hangry. And so today is not a good day to tell your boss what you really think or to tell your siblings or your spouse what's really bothering you. It's probably a day to just ride it out, to endure, because sometimes our hanger can betray us in that way, as it has done to me in the past. And so instead, fasting is about removing those obstacles from God. I might suggest, again, if you're looking, I don't know how to fast, perhaps social media. That's what I try to do each year, to fast from social media, which often can become a real obstacle to God. And so maybe that's a way you can do that. So we have prayer, fasting, and finally the third has to do with opening our hearts and turning away from our own selfishness, which sometimes can develop. And so this is the pillar of almsgiving. And so there's different ways we can give alms, to give to the poor, to those in need. There's a variety of ways. There's material poverty, but also an emotional poverty that is often present in our world. And so there's lots of ways to give alms. Father Sight, in his bulletin column, talked about being charitable in our words. Another way is we have an almsgiving project. There's little cards in the narthex there, and maybe you want to take one of those to give to those who are in need in Oswego County. But I encourage you, and we're invited to look for ways of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. They don't have to be dramatic, but in some way to take each of these to heart. A final note about this season of Lent, it's a time of conversion, and often we're eager at the beginning, and within a few days we can become discouraged. The enthusiasm fades, our own practices of giving things up can start to falter. And it's good to remember that this season is meant to help us recognize our need for God, and so we should acknowledge our weakness. And so if you're struggling in Lent, that's not a bad thing. That's actually an essential step. Many saints are in the same boat as you. Augustine talks about standing on the brink of resolution, trying it again and again, but falling short. Paul in Romans 7 says, "I do not do the good I want, I do the evil I do not want. Miserable one that I am, who will deliver me from this mortal body?" And so both Paul and Augustine and many saints, again, recognize their weakness. And so if you're struggling with your Lenten observance, that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's the first step. But there's a second step, and Paul goes on to say, "Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord." And that's the purpose of all of this, that we should be drawn to recognize our weakness and then to depend on God, not on ourselves, but on the Lord. And so a little life hack that I'll give you for Lent to really bring it to heart is to pray daily, asking for the grace you need to keep your Lenten practice. Each day we should pray, Lord, give me the grace I need to pray, to fast, to give alms, whatever you've made a commitment to do. We have to ask. And when we do, Jesus says, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find. And so we can have great confidence that God is ready to give us that grace when we're willing to acknowledge our need for him and to ask for his help. And so know of my prayers for you, and please pray for each other as we enter this holy season of Lent, a time of conversion, of recognizing our need for God and turning back to the Lord.